Aaniiih, Iitaanɔɔn'i, Beata. Hello, my friends. My name is Shell Woman. My name is Joan Racine. I live in Hays, Montana. I was born at Fort Belknap Hospital in 1954. I am enrolled Aaniiih. I'm a descendant of Assiniboine and Métis. My dad is Harold Bazoo Work Sr. My mother is Teresa Cuts the Rope Work. My grandparents are Bob Work and Isabel Gardapi Work. My maternal grandfather is Frank Cuts the Rope, and Matilda White Plume Cuts the Rope.
Who are your kids?
My kids are Donald Racine III, who is Little Don, Shelley, Carrie, and Tyrell. Being a Aaniiih is an honor, and I'm blessed. I love my tribe, I love my people. What people say about the Aaniiih is that they're very generous people, and you'll see that in our community, especially in Hays. I went to St. Paul's Mission School for my elementary school years. Then I went my freshman and junior year there. Then in my sophomore and my senior year, I went to Harlem, and I graduated from Harlem. It had its good points and its not so good points. I guess I could say that I was always quote unquote a good student, so I didn't really get in trouble. I always got good grades, good behavior, but there were kids probably in my class that weren't very well behaved or did what they were supposed to or expected of. And there was, I guess, I don't know how to put it, like you hear what went on in the boarding schools. Well, that's what went on there. If you misbehaved, you suffered the consequences. Either getting whipped with, I don't know, I guess they call it a board, or got their hands hit with a ruler, that kind of discipline. I did experience that by seeing it done, not to myself, but to others. Then the other part of it, I did learn a lot, which helped me later on in life, academically. Like I said, I was a good student, and it did show where I could keep up with other students. When I went to another school, like off the res at Harlem School, I did well. I did just as well as they did. So whatever they instilled in me, it carried on in my life. Then even one thing that I know helped me too, like with life skills is they had the House of Loretto, where they taught us like how to clean, take care of our homes, do crafts, sewing. That types of education helped me too. So it had its good points and it had its bad points going to school there. Probably my favorite was Father Simino. He was there a long time. I remember him because he'd always come and visit us at the house. There was Father Robinson, Father Brown, then later on Father Bob, then the other was the notorious Brother Ryan. A few of the nuns that I remember was Sister Mel. She was the cook. Sister Germaine was the cook. Sister Siegfrieda, I think, was my first grade teacher. Sister Charisma. Sister Claire, Sister Giswalda. Those are the ones I remember the most. I never considered us poor, but if we were poor, so was everyone else in our community. Ourselves, poor, by my standards. What she would cook was like deer meat, wild game, fried potatoes, macaroni and tomato sauce, macaroni and cheese, then like pie. And our pie would probably be, like raisin, because it was commodity. She'd make raisin pie. But those are still my favorite foods today. The main thing was hanging out with my cousins, because that's who we grew up with. And one of the main things we did, I guess, was play in the, I guess you'd call it, brush where we lived. We'd be from my Grandma Cuddy's all the way up to my Uncle Clyde's. Then we'd have our own spots down there all throughout the bottom where my grandma and grandpa Cutseropes lived, all the way up to where my Uncle Clyde lived. I think that's where Warren lives now, Warren Work, his son. But that's where we hung out. And we'd ride horses bareback through the brush. And we had our own berry spots, like berry picking spots, our own gooseberries, our own June berries. Then we were smaller than that. We'd have like little homes in our bushes, where we'd have like little houses where we'd play dolls with. But probably the best part growing up was riding horses. My grandparents spoke it, but it goes with the trauma of what happened to them in boarding schools. So they wouldn't speak it around us. They knew, they did speak to each other, and once in a while they would speak, but not very often. And it comes from that trauma of what happened in the boarding schools. So they didn't, especially my grandfather, Frank Cutserope, didn't want his children to endure what they did at the boarding school, so they wouldn't speak it, although my mother and her sisters, her brothers, they understood it, and they probably could speak it, but they wouldn't because they were protecting us. But later on, with my grandmother Matilda, she would, when we'd visit, she'd, tell me what a Assiniboine was, which is Aaniiih. She'd tell me words like that, like bread, but that was only because I was older. But they didn't do it when we were younger. The only time I lived off the reservation is when I went to college. I went to college at the University of Montana as soon as I graduated from high school. Then I lived in Havre, and I finished up college there at Northern. But that's the only time I lived off the reservation. During that time, when I was young, it was fun. I mean, I had friends there and, hung out with them a lot. There was a lot of things to do. But living in Havre too, it's sorry to say, it's a redneck town, and we did, experience a lot of racism. But it was a learning experience for me. I worked for the tribe for 17 years total at different jobs. I worked for the planning department, folk rehab, the environmental protection office. I worked at the hospital. Then later on, I became a teacher. But before that, I worked as a gifted and talented coordinator. I worked as a teacher's aide and a tutor. Then I became a teacher. The last job I held was for 18 months. I worked at the Life's Language Lodge. And now I'm fully retired. That goes back to my grandparents. Again, they didn't allow us to, but we did attend, I guess, powwows. They were probably at the Mission Rec Center that I remember the most. But growing up, no. From probably the time I was born and baptized, it was totally part of my life. They do have a senior center down at Old Hays, but I feel that more could be done for them. Like taking them out on outings, doing more activities with them instead of just going there to eat. I think they need to do more for them that way. Even when we were growing up and we worked on, say, like Speedy, it's a different name back then, but we would go into their homes and help them clean or help them do yard work, whatever they needed. But today I see that that isn't done anymore. But just checking up on them more and providing them more services. I know a lot of our veterans are elders now, and I think they're kind of neglected. I think the tribe or tribal programs need to go around and ask the elders, especially the veteran elders, what do you need? How could we help you? So basically more activities for them and more services. Life on the reservation, especially in Hays, was more safer. When we were younger, we lived, like a mile from Hays. We were able to walk up and down the road without worrying, something was gonna happen to us. We could go to people's houses. We knew we were safe. We'd go to people's houses. When we went to people's houses, they'd feed us, give us something to drink. We always knew that we were taken care of, would be taken care of, looked after. Now, no, it's not safe. And that's a big worry, especially as a grandmother. I keep my grandchildren close and safe. I said, I don't know how that problem could be solved, maybe with more law enforcement. I don't know. It's just that I guess the morals and values have changed since I was younger. But the big difference now is being safe in our own community. Like I said, when I was older, powwows, I attended more powwows. But like the fiddle music also is a big part of my life because that's my dad's culture. The Métis culture, that was my dad's culture. There was always dances, fiddle dances, and that's where our, remember when we did our hoedown? That's where we derived it from, was how they had that, like the basket social. That's where it's derived from, is the Métis culture. That's what they did in the past. And they were fun, always fun. A lot of food. I know my uncle Happy Doney was a great fiddler, and he'd even come to our house and play music. My dad would chord for him. They were fun times. They always said the Métis were the happy people, and they are. They were like upbeat, happy, always laughing. And that's what I remember. I would say both of my grandmothers, my paternal and maternal grandmothers, Isabel Work and Matilda Cutthroat, I was fortunate. I got to know I knew my grandmothers, and they taught me a lot, just like how they raised their families. That's kind of where I got the love of doing this, was doing this garden, Niwa's garden, along with my other two sisters, was them telling me about plants. And while some knowledge got passed on to me through them, and I wanted to continue with that. And I'm finally being able to do that now. But not just that, but just their values. I learned from them. Just they were both Catholics. it was all about just being a good person. That's what I got from them, is just treat people good. I guess that's the main thing that they passed on to me. It didn't matter that they were Aaniiih or Métis. What they passed on was just to be a good person overall. I feel that the Aaniiih and Nakoda people came a long way because they were put on this reservation together because they were enemies. And the government's hope was that they would, maybe kill each other off, which didn't happen. Our leaders back then realized that they had to get along so that, they could live. They had to live together, so they did. And I think someday that they eventually will, because they proved it already that they can, they have to work together, and they can. Why I'm thinking about this at this time is because it's the Hays powwow, and we talked about naming our grandchildren, a few of them that don't have their names, and this memory popped up. Like I told Shaylee and Billy, our powwows were more like in the Mission Rec Center, and I was probably about 12 years old, 10 at the time, and it must have been my first dance where I actually danced, but I wasn't dressed in regalia. All I had on was a plain green dress that my mother probably got from the attic, but I had a cape. The cape was beaded like in sequins, and it must have been Letty and I's first dance. And I remember her dad, Bruce Downey, he gave away money for our first dance, and that memory still sticks in my mind today. Even though he wasn't an Aaniiih or Assiniboine, he was Métis, but he lived here, and he had, just like my dad, he adapted the ways of the Aaniiih, and he knew what to do. And so that's probably one of my fondest memories, is of my Uncle Bruce Downey giving away for my first time dancing. Learn your language, learn your culture, learn your traditional ways, which includes learning about your traditional plants, as medicines includes. If you don't know, go ask somebody. There's even books out there that will help you. There's books on our people. Just learn. Start learning now before all our culture and our language disappears.